a new finding concerning Chernobyl radiation, how a new source of high-level radioactive fallout now threatens the world, Sebastian Ketley of Express UK reports. Chernobyl's 1986 reactor explosion is the biggest nuclear disaster in history, and it's the subject matter of HBO's recent film on the subject, HBO's critically acclaimed drama Chernobyl. But new research suggests that Chernobyl's global consequences are not over. They're actually very far from over. Chernobyl accident, April 26, 1986, threatened to cover the entire European continent in highly radioactive dust smoke. 2 Chernobyl power plant workers died immediately when the plant's reactor 4 suffered a steam explosion, and another 20 people died during the following week from radiation poisoning. The world nuclear disaster estimates around 5% of the nuclear core, the reactor's nuclear core, was released into the atmosphere, traveling from northern Ukraine as far as Sweden within days. But the legacy of Chernobyl and other incidents like the 2011 Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster in Japan could rear their ugly heads again in the future. Researchers from University of Plymouth School of Geography, Earth and Environmental Sciences warned the combined nuclear fallout from Chernobyl, Fukushima, and Cold War nuclear tests is collecting in the world's glaciers. Significant amounts of highly radioactive particles are trapped in the world's iciest regions, and they're just there waiting to be released. And if the dire effects of global warming contribute to the accelerated melting of these glaciers, decades worth of nuclear fallout could be released into the atmosphere. Plymouth scientists have found evidence of man-made radioactive fallout in 17 glaciers across the Arctic, Iceland, Antarctica, Canada, and the Caucasus Mountains. Carolyn Clayson, a lecturer in physical geography at Plymouth, said, "They are some of the highest levels you see in environments outside nuclear exclusion zones." The dire news was published recently, April of this year, in the 2019 General Assembly of the European Geoscience Union, the EGU, in Vienna, Austria. But with the release of HBO's and Sky's Atlantic historic drama last month, the interest in the dangers of radioactivity is on the rise again. Dr. Klassen said radioactive particles are very light, so when they are taken up into the atmosphere, they can be transported a very long way away. And when it falls as rain, like after Chernobyl, it washes away, and it'll it's a sort of a one-off event. But as snow, it stays in the ice for decades, and as it melts in response to the climate, it's then washed downstream. When Chernobyl's reactor 4 exploded in 1986, the burning reactor core continuously released clouds of radioactive smoke for 10 days. The Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia were hit with the worst by the radioactive fallout, but increased background radiation levels were reported in Scandinavia and Western Europe. The exact death toll of Chernobyl disaster is up for debate, but the Union of Concerned Scientists estimates between 4,000 and 27,000 people died as a result of increased radioactive exposure. A 19-mile wide or 30-kilometer wide Chernobyl exclusion zone now surrounds the power plant and the nearby city of Pripyat, where more than 100,000 people were evacuated from never to return there. Nuclear fallout concerns were then raised once again, as we know, in 2011 after the deadly Tohoku earthquake and tsunami in Japan's Fukushima prefecture. The tsunami struck the Daiichi nuclear power plant in Huma, triggering the second biggest nuclear disaster in history. Now, up to date, Chernobyl and Fukushima are the only nuclear meltdowns ranked level 7 by the International Nuclear Event scale. Another source of nuclear fallout collecting in the world's glaciers are the frequent nuclear weapon testing conducted on either side of the Iron Curtain during the Cold War. Dr. Klassen said, "We're talking about weapons testing from the 1950s and 60s and onwards, going right back in the development of the bomb. If we take a sediment core, you can see a clear spike where Chernobyl was, but you can also see quite a definite spike in around 1963, when there was a period of quite heavy weapons testing. According to the expert, the results are evidence in humanity's nuclear legacy has not disappeared yet." Now, how big was 1986 Chernobyl nuclear disaster? In the immediate aftermath of Chernobyl's reactor erupting, the World Nuclear Association claims the largest uncontrolled radioactive release into the environment ever had occurred. The nuclear disaster continued to release radioactive material from the burning open reactor into the air for 10 days. The eruptions released deadly radiation in the form of iodine-131 and cesium-137 isotopes. The World Nuclear Association said initial radiation exposure in contaminated area was due to short-lived iodine-131. Later, cesium-137 was the main hazard. About 5 million people live in the areas of Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine contaminated, and about 400,000 lived in more contaminated areas of strict control by the authorities. Now, Chernobyl originally had a confinement dome, which has been replaced because it wasn't good enough. The new safety confinement, or NSC, or new shelter, is a structure built to confine the remains of the number 4 reactor until at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, which was destroyed during the Chernobyl disaster in '86. The structure also encloses the temporary shelter structure, the sarcophagus that was built around the reactor immediately after the disaster. The new safe confinement is designed to prevent the release of radioactive contaminants from exiting the shelter, protect the reactor from external influence, facilitate the disassembly and decomposition of the reactor, and prevent water intrusion into it. The safe confinement is the mega project that is part of the shelter implementation plan supported by the Chernobyl Shelter Fund, designed in the primary goal of confining the radioactive remains of Reactor 4, and is supposed to be doing that for the next 100 years. It also aims to allow for a partial demolition of the original sarcophagus, which was hastily constructed by Chernobyl liquidators after a beyond design basis accident destroyed the reactor. The word confinement is used rather than the traditional containment to emphasize the difference between containment of radioactive gases, the primary focus of most reactor containment buildings, and the confinement of solid radioactive waste. That is the primary purpose of the new safe confinement. In 2015, the European Bank of Reconstruction Development stated that the international community was aiming to close a €100 million funding gap with administration by the EBRD in the role as manager of the Chernobyl decomposition funds. The total cost of the shelter implementation plan, of which the new safe confinement is the most prominent, is estimated to be around €2.15 billion. That's about $2.3 billion. The new safe confinement accounts for $1.5 billion. That's about over 2/3 of that. The French consortium Novarca, with partners Vinci Construction, Grand Projects, and Bourgoux Travaux Publics, designed and built the new safe confinement construction, and was completed at the end of last year, 2018. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.